and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast. I'm Ryan, and joining me once again is Alex Kane.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. So, the last time we talked, it was just before the release of your Knights of the Old Republic book for Boss Fight. But now that's out. It's out in the wild.
Yep. It came out on the 9th, like the day before I had to pack and run to Celebration, or the day I was packing for Celebration even, maybe. So that was very chaotic and surreal. And then, of course, we had all those technical difficulties last time, too, that ate up a half an hour of our chat time. So I was like, I need to come back and hang out again. So I'm glad that we're doing it.
Yeah, so, I've seen personally on my Twitter feed, a really positive response to the book from both, games journalists, Star Wars fans, and some industry folks as well.
Yeah, it's been really kind of shockingly positive. I knew that the book was short. It was contracted to be 30,000 words, it was my first book. I knew that people were going to say it was short. I knew that, it was my first time doing something that long. And people have been overwhelmingly sort of supportive and, say that they're learning things that they didn't know, which is, that was goal number one, was not to just compile everything that everybody has heard 100 times. I didn't want to write a book length Wikipedia article that's just all the crap that you can find in a forum somewhere.
Right.
It's finding the balance between telling a story that hadn't really been told before, but also not kind of leaving out all the key stuff, just because it's old news or whatever. It was a tightrope, and I guess, somehow people are digging it. So that's, I'm really grateful for that.
And that's one of the things I like most about the book is it reads like a narrative, rather than just a bunch of bullet point facts about the game.
Awesome. Yeah. That was really the goal, was to okay, I'm going to tell the story and have it try to feel a little bit, not like a novel, but to have it feel we're following these people around through their, these 3 years of their lives and hopefully, capturing what it's actually like to make a Star Wars game, in some way, even if, these people, are talking about something that happened 15, 16 years ago and their memories are fuzzy, it's at least do my best to do that. And, people are enjoying it. So, I couldn't really ask for more than that. I guess I'm pretty pleased with the reviews and things that people have been saying.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations again on that. I also noticed a theme. I noticed a lot of themes at Celebration this year, but there's definitely a lot of interest, and I guess it's always been there, but I was really seeing it this year in the Old Republic in general.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the cosplay was everywhere. I think, my first, on Thursday was kind of my free day before I really had to work. So I had a work meeting Thursday morning at 11 a.m. And then I sort of just went out on the show floor and just kind of wandered. And some of the first things I saw were Revan action figures. I saw a Revan replica prop mask, for that a cosplayer would buy and wear and look really good in, and it was I actually went to the KOTOR Cantina event for the Old Republic MMO, where the BioWare Austin guys were sort of set up and talking about the next expansion, Onslaught, and that place was just insanely cool. I saw somebody there was two friends maybe together, and one was Darth Malak and one was sort of the very typical Jedi design in KOTOR when you sort of make your character. If you make sort of a white male, like the sort of canonical looking Revan with like the long brown hair and stuff. Like this guy,
Hmm.
this guy did a really good job of looking like that version of Revan, and you know, like even the pads on his shoulders are sort of like blocky, those sort of 2003, low polygon graphics and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very cool. I was like, wow, this is exactly where I want to be right now. And yeah, it was just, yeah, I mean, there was like Master and Apprentice came out the day after Celebration, Claudia Gray's new novel, and there's like all
Hmm.
kinds of KOTOR Easter eggs and that, and I'm just like, um, yeah, you couldn't get far in Celebration without hearing somebody talk about, Revan and Bastila, or seeing stuff from the MMO, or um, I saw a lot of Darth Treyas or Kreyas, all over the place and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And yeah, saw a lot of Darth Nihilus cosplays. Yeah, pretty wild.
Yeah, I was at the Star Wars show live stage at one point, and
Hmm.
I was standing like in the vicinity of a Bastila cosplayer,
Hmm.
and someone like ran up to her, and it was like the most excited I've seen a person for a cosplayer,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
was like, "Oh my God, Knights of the Old Republic, Bastila, can I get a picture?" Like,
Hmm.
just yeah, that excitement was definitely there, and from the sounds of it, Lucasfilm is hearing that. It seems.
Yeah.
Did you see the MTV
Yeah.
interview
Hmm.
with Kathy Kennedy?
Yeah, and I was very, when I saw the sort of the tweet that, I think his name's Josh Horowitz for MTV News.
Yes.
He tweeted and it said something like Kathleen Kennedy on this, and the possibility of a Knights of the Old Republic film. And I'm just like, well, there's no way, he's overselling this. And I watched the interview, and he says, like, Knights of the Old Republic, a lot of fans want to see that. Is there any development on that, is like how he phrased it. He didn't specify TV, movie, whatever.
Hmm.
I'm guessing that he didn't mean game, and I don't think Kathy thought he meant game. I think that the understanding was film or TV is the way it comes across,
Hmm.
without really saying TV or film. And she goes, yeah, like, we absolutely are developing something to look at. So it's like,
Hmm.
there were all these rumors in the press. I shouldn't even be saying this, but there were all these reports of Boba Fett, and all these reports of Obi-Wan, and of course, like, we haven't seen those materialize in any kind of like
Hmm.
official announcement yet. So it's sort of like in that moment where, okay, Kathleen Kennedy knows what Knights of the Old Republic is. She knows that people love it and they want it, and she was willing to say that publicly when, had she ever said anything about those Boba Fett and Obi-Wan projects that were supposedly happening? I don't really recall her talking about those. So it's very much sort of a grain of salt thing. It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, it could very well not become anything, but for her to acknowledge it very like enthusiastically and be like, oh yeah, Knights of the Old Republic, yeah, we absolutely are talking about that, was just very exciting for me, and for anybody who cares about that game. I'm sure it's like, oh wow, did not see that coming, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think we're definitely going to have to wait until episode 9 is out. But then, once episode 9 is out, like, there's a pretty clean slate once the Skywalker saga is complete. Like, I mean, who knows where Star Wars film is going to go? Is it going to go, directly after the Skywalker saga? Is it going to go far in the future? Or
Hmm.
is it going to go far in the past?
Yeah. Well, it's like Johnson has acknowledged that he played the KOTOR games back in '03 and '04, and that he liked them. He also said he
Mm-hmm.
also said he doesn't want to just like adapt that either. But then
Yeah.
everybody's sort of like, well, Benioff and Weiss are a really good choice to do Old Republic stuff, and supposedly the three of those guys are in close communication about sort of what they're doing. And I don't know, it feels very possible that, Weiss and Benioff could do, sort of an Old Republic thing, and Johnson could do like a pre-Phantom Menace thing, but not thousands of years ago, but just like, 100 years ago or 50 years ago, young Yoda, when Yoda's like a, young man.
Like, yeah, like 700 years old.
Yeah, he's like 700 in the prime of his life. No, yeah, it's just, there's a lot of possibilities right now where, yeah. And did you see the footage from The Mandalorian? Were you at that one?
I was in the Wintrust for that. Yeah.
Yeah, same. And it was like, right there is sort of like a glimpse of the future, I think, right? Like that project is so interesting because it sure looks and feels like Star Wars, but it doesn't have Star Wars in the title. It's The Mandalorian, and it's like the tone is very like prestige television, like, Mad Men, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. Like, that's what it feels like. It feels like they're trying to make a serious, sort of crime drama. Oh, and by the way, it's in space, and there are, the Empire, and I don't know. It's like, they can really sort of stretch the boundaries if they choose to, and drop the Star Wars brand and just kind of make something new, but keep it within, sort of continuity and canon, and just kind of, build the audience and do things for pieces of the audience that maybe don't dig the sequel trilogy, although I question how big that audience really is. But if there's people who are like, oh, I just straight up hated 7 and 8, I mean, yeah, so what do you do for them? You do something a little bit more mature maybe, or you've got like a child audience as well who likes those little shorts on YouTube, the Galaxy of Adventures, which are wonderful. Like, I could easily see like feature length movies like that would be incredible. It's just once 9 comes out, I feel like nothing's really off the table at that point. We can go all kinds of directions.
Yeah, and I think like this celebration was kind of like the real proof of what you were just saying. It was a 5-day Star Wars celebration, but there was something for like all 5 days, well, 4 days maybe, but all 4 days of programming for like every type of Star Wars fan. If you're a collector, if you're a builder, if you're a cosplayer, if you're into the sequel trilogy, the prequels, the video games, the animation, the books, like there was programming for everyone there. And I thought that was like really fantastic and a good, indicator of where things are going in the future.
Yeah. I also, I had like just a little bit of free time just to sit down and kind of watch the Galaxy's Edge panel as well.
Yeah.
And so that was a similar thing where it was like, okay, this is another glimpse of the future of what they're going to do with the brand. And yeah, I mean, stuff like that's sort of in the real world and kind of aimed at families, like that's exciting. I don't know that I'll ever be able to afford to go, but man, like I really want to go, and of course, like any fan would probably, but yeah, I mean, and yeah, I didn't even see the Clone Wars panel yet, and it's just like, but I saw like most of the other stuff, and it's just like I felt well nourished in terms of like, wow, we've sure got a lot of stuff to be excited about. My last thing before I like got in the car and rode home with my carpool buddies was the Resistance panel, and that was like one of the most exciting panels I saw. I thought that cast is so good, and their enthusiasm for that show is like just totally infectious. And yeah, again, another audience. It's sort of a different audience than the Mandalorian, right? Like, but yeah, it was all fun. It was all. I really had a good time. I think that they're smart about how they're developing things for kind of everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the Resistance panel, and you actually wrote up like kind of synopsis of
Yeah.
that for StarWars.com.
Hmm.
If you can speak about that, what is the process like for a freelancer contributing to StarWars.com?
Yeah, I mean, so I was basically I was in a freelance capacity. I was covering the event for Star Wars. So there was Dan Brooks, who's the editor of StarWars.com, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
the I believe assistant editor, or I can't remember what her exact title is, but Kristen Baver, and then or content strategist, and then there was Lucas Seastrom, who's like a PR writer for Lucasfilm. He was covering too, and then I was just there as a freelancer who, had very enthusiastically begged Dan to let me help cover the event, and
Mm-hmm.
and he said yes, and so that was sort of my justification for going to Celebration in some ways, like,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah. So what I did was I basically got assigned certain panels, and then it was like I had to write recaps of those panels. So that was like um, Fallen Order, Resistance, the ILM model shop. Um, there was another one earlier than that. Oh, the collectibles panel. That was really cool. Got to see a lot about how some of those toys are made, like the very very high end collectible toys, and some of the upcoming stuff that they were sort of showing off and announcing for the first time. But yeah, I mean, I have a good relationship with Dan Brooks. I've been writing for him for like 2 years basically. So for StarWars.com, and yeah, he kind of took a big risk because I had never sort of been in the field with him, like, in the flesh, right? Like reporting from, an event rather than just kind of writing features from home and stuff. So yeah, he took a chance on me, and I hopefully I didn't let him down. I did a couple interviews. Well, it's one interview with two people, and that's going up. I would imagine like Monday or something. And I think that's the best thing that I wrote at Celebration, or like from Celebration, and so that hasn't gone up yet. That's a Fallen Order interview that I'm really, really excited for
Ooh.
people to read. I interviewed the VP of Lucasfilm Games, and then I interviewed the CEO of Respawn. And it's really funny because, like, they really didn't want to spill details. So, a lot of it is me, like, sort of poking fun at, them being tight-lipped. And, yeah, they had a really good sense of humor about everything. And I love the way that it came out, so I'm hoping that it gets published more or less in the form that I sent it, and that they don't cut too much stuff out, because I thought it was very amusing, and yeah, I'm really proud of that. So we'll see. Um,
Nice. Definitely looking forward to that. And, I really appreciate your resistance panel write up, because
awesome.
I was at another panel when that was happening. And, I'm a big fan of season 1 of Resistance, and I'm pretty jealous about not getting to see the the first episode. But,
Yeah.
I at least through your write up was able to, you know, find out what was talked about and how the panel went and stuff. And yeah, I think, like, what you were saying about the cast and that connection, like, that reminds me a lot of, kind of the history of Lucasfilm animation. Like, you get really tight-knit casts on these shows,
Mm-hmm.
like Clone Wars, Rebels, and now Resistance. And, like, that's really good to hear, because, like, I think that chemistry definitely matters.
Yeah, I think it really does. And Christopher Sean, who plays Kaz in the show, like, he's very sort of not accessible, but, like, he's very mingles with the fans on Twitter, and
Mm-hmm.
he tweeted that he listened to some podcasts recently, and, like, one of them was like an interview that I did about KOTOR. He, like, listened to that podcast, and it's just like, whoa, wait, what? Kaz knows about my book, and yeah, that, I mean, He just seems very, very positive and just kind of a nice breath of fresh air. I think that anybody who had been doing something like that for a really long time would probably get a little burnt out on Star Wars fans after a while. But it's all so new and exciting for him, and he's just kind of like really sort of enjoying his his time in the sun, so to speak. His like he's sort of the new hero of Star Wars in some ways, and you can tell that he's just like having a blast, and it comes across in the character, comes across at the panel when he's on stage talking about the character and stuff. So, definitely a fan of every member of that cast. Really, like they're so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to see at the Star Wars show live stage. I was like right up in front when Susie McGrath came out.
Oh, yeah, she's great.
And she is wonderful. And I think like Tam is probably my favorite character on the show. So like that was awesome just to be like hanging out there, killing some time, drinking a coffee between panels, and then be like, oh, it's Tam. Nice.
Yeah, there's good Tam content coming in that episode that they showed us, so I won't be spoilery, but oh man, yeah, they're definitely not forgetting about Tam in season 2, so I'm excited.
That's such a compelling story. I'm so excited.
It's really good.
Nice. All right, so I guess the next thing I wanted to bring up with you, because like you are all over the internet this week and in my Twitter feed, you wrote a top 10 Star Wars game list for Variety.
Yeah, that was
How did that come up? Did you pitch that, or did you talk to someone who wanted to do it?
So I've written for Variety in the past, like I do like a weekly like little Fortnite update post thing, and then when the challenges go live each week, and then I've done a lot of features like in the past, sort of when I wasn't neck deep in finishing the book, and I think what happened was that Brian, the editor there, saw something on Facebook about my book, or something, somebody retweeted about my book on Twitter, and he was like, hey, are you going to Celebration? Like, hey, do you want to do like a feature about the greatest Star Wars games of all time, kind of pegged to the Fallen Order announcement? And I was just like, oh man, like, first of all, I have to like pack for Celebration, and like I'm so nervous about this trip, and like making a good first impression, like working for Lucasfilm, like sort of on site, in the flesh, and not screwing anything up. And then and just the sort of the responsibility that comes with saying, okay, let's narrow it down to 10 great Star Wars games in the correct order, and not get like not get booed off the stage, so to speak, and because people have a lot of opinions about Star Wars video games, and so I was tempted to just be like, no, I'm sorry, I don't have time to do this. And what I did was he wanted it like during Celebration, and I was like, there's no way. I was like, would it still be worthwhile if I did it a week from now and turned it into you like Wednesday or Thursday of next week or something like that? And he's like, yeah, sure, that's fine. And I was like, oh damn, now I actually have to do it, because he said that's fine. And so it was just, and he was very pleased with it. I mean, and that's the thing, right? It's like the first person you have to please is the editor. Like they're the audience that matters in some ways, because they're either gonna like publish it and pay you and maybe hire you again to write another thing, or they're not, or they're gonna hate you and not publish it or whatever. And he goes, this is great, this is fun, pitch me more features, man. And I'm like, okay, like, so that was nice to hear for a start. And then when it went live, like people didn't like send me death threats and tell me I was an idiot and should jump off a bridge, which I expected them to do. I expected it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be, very controversial because it's like you only pick 10 games out of what, like, there are a lot of Star Wars games.
Hundreds.
Yeah, and then, if you don't even put them in the correct order, I mean, somehow that's even worse. Like, oh, you put my favorite game on there, but you said it's number 8, like, and so yeah, I was pretty pleasantly surprised with sort of how well it went over. There were some people who commented like, "Oh, you didn't put like Rogue Squadron 2 on here, like, oh, this list is garbage or whatever." But I mean, like, whatever. You can see like my biases in it. It's very much Alex Kane's top 10 of all time. It's like there's some shooters. There's sort of some like, I felt like I had to have certain things in there, like retro. I had to have some retro cred in there, and so it was sort of like my earnest attempt to not just put my favorites, but also like, what do I truly feel are the 10 best Star Wars games. And so I don't think that if you compare shooters like I love Shadows of the Empire, I love Dark Forces, I love Rogue Squadron, but I think if you hold those up next to like contemporary shooters of their time and compare them, like, I think that Star Fox 64 is vastly superior to Rogue Squadron. I think that whatever shooters were out when, like GoldenEye is vastly superior to like Shadows of the Empire and things like that. So I mean, I don't want to downplay the achievement of those games because I do love them, but in some ways, I tried to explain myself where I could. I think that I sort of said Jedi Outcast is, it kind of is just better than Dark Forces because it's like, it iterates on that formula and tells a really cool story, and it has a lot more emphasis on like lightsaber and force combat and stuff like that. But yeah, what did you think of like the picks? Like, did you think that it was just ludicrous or?
I think like with a, I've been reading like top 10, top 50 video game lists since, whenever they did like, it was like an issue of Nintendo Power, like 25 years ago or something that they like, that I saw like the first list like that. And I was like, whoa, this is gospel, like right here. And then like over time you start realizing, okay, like there's some lists that are made by like a team of staffers and there's like debate, like what like IGN does with their lists and stuff. And so you're getting a lot of different perspectives. There's some lists that are focused on like, most important versus most fun to play. And, so there's a lot of factors to kind of take into consideration with these sort of lists. But I think like it's pretty easy to kind of, as a reader, recognize that, yes, this is Alex Kane's top 10 Star Wars game list, because it's one person writing it. I do have a question for you, though. Like,
sure.
When coming up with this list, you said that, you were considering a lot of different factors when making the list. Was the variety gaming readership a factor at all? Did that kind of come into play? Because like, I don't know, I mean, I think of variety as like in general like this kind of like, like highbrow publication like on the movie side, and I think bringing Brian from Kotaku over, I expect that kind of like hard-hitting like deep dives into like the human side of gaming and stuff. And was that a factor at all when you were writing it?
I mean, I love like the new Battlefronts by DICE, but I also think that it's not as though they did like a lot for like visually, like the visual fidelity and like the authenticity. Okay, yes, like they're supreme. And I love those games. I play Battlefront 2 all the time, but I felt first of all, I set like an arbitrary rule that I would only have one entry per series, with the sole exception of KOTOR 2, because I knew that if KOTOR 2 wasn't on the list, that's just dishonest, first of all, and second of all, I knew that people would just be like, oh really, like only KOTOR 1 but you left KOTOR 2 off, like you're an idiot, you know. And yeah, I felt like it would be really dishonest not to have both KOTORs, because those games I think are kind of singular in just how influential and important they are for Star Wars as a whole. Like, you know, Dave Filoni putting Malachor in Rebels, and, you know, I mean, come on, like you really like can't like overstate how important those two games are. However, it's like I had to pick 10 games. So it's like, if I'm going to put a Battlefront, I had to put 2005 Battlefront 2, I felt, because, you know, it was the one that sort of did the most to kind of advance what a Star Wars game could be, you know, in terms of like, oh wow, I can like be on foot as a, you know, battle droid or a Jedi or a whatever, and then I can like hop in my ARC 170 and like take flight and then go have like a space battle. And it's like, I mean, even Battlefront 2 2017 doesn't have that. Like, hate to point that out. You know, the new mode is very much like a love letter. What's it called? Capital Supremacy. It's very much a love letter to Battlefront 2005, Battlefront 2. But even then, it has a loading screen cinematic between like being on foot and being up in the capital ship, and I don't think that there's any real like, there's no like dogfighting happening in that mode. So I mean, Battlefront 2 2005 is really like a technical marvel when you think about when it came out, and the other kinds of sort of you know, third person battlefield type shooters that were around back then. Like the shooting stuff, the gunplay isn't particularly impressive by like modern standards, but like all the other stuff, the sum of the parts is like really impressive. You did mention that like there's like sort of how fun is it to play today, and then what did it mean from, you know, in terms of impact when it came out. And the list was very much trying to just do both, you know. Pick 10 games with, you know, my tastes being something of a factor. But yeah, like Polygon did like the 100 best games of all time or something like that recently, or the, you know, some crazy number of the best games of all time. And they had like everybody who writes for Polygon got a say, right? And or, you know, a lot of people who write for Polygon had a say in that. And for this, it was, I had 24 hours as one person, you know, I don't want to say I had 24 hours, but I basically had 24 hours as one guy to be like, here's one idiot's opinions about what the 10 greatest Star Wars games are. And so I really just tried to work within those constraints and just do the absolute best job I could. You know, it's not a perfect article, but I do really stand by it, and I am really like proud of it. But, yeah, it hurt to share it and be really proud of it, and then like immediately realize that I'm friends with all these people who worked on Battlefront 2 2017, and then have them click on it and be like, oh, where's Battlefront 2017? And you know, I kind of knew that would happen, but it's just like when you can only pick 10 games, right? It's like you know, yeah, what can you do? And like I said, I did make that arbitrary rule for myself, because I mean, if somebody wrote a top 10 list of all the greatest Star Wars games of all time, and 3 of the answers were like Rogue Squadron 1 through 3, you'd be like, wow, you must be really fun at parties. Like,
first of all, you're lying about 3.
I don't know, but it's just like, I don't know. Like, yeah, you can definitely see that when it comes to Star Wars games, my tastes skew toward like sort of lightsaber action games and RPG type games and things like that. You know, I was pretty happy with my choice to put Star Wars Arcade from 1983 in like the third spot. I was like, that's kind of a gutsy move. I thought that the Revenge of the Sith being like number 9 or 8 or something. I did Galaxies for 10, and then I think Revenge of the Sith was number 9. And I
Yeah.
felt really good about, getting Revenge of the Sith on there because it's sort of the underdog in my book. It's sort of the game that gets forgotten because it's similar to a lot of really mediocre games, but it actually, they actually kind of got everything in there that needed to be in it, and it's fun, and it had a lightsaber dueling mode that had some of the best lightsaber combat to this day. One of my the first article I ever pitched to StarWars.com never got published, and I think that the reason that it never got published is I said that the lightsaber combat in this game, the Revenge of the Sith game from '05, like to this day, they haven't really topped that. The Force Unleashed, even they was a step backward 3 years later in terms of the lightsaber combat. But all the Force stuff and the game as a whole was better, but Revenge of the Sith, they had Nick Gillard on the mocap set, like having him consulting on the lightsaber combat. They had Hayden Christensen saying like, here's what my idle stance should be, like this is how Anakin would stand if he was in a video game, and they really cared, and they got a lot of those details right, and it really does feel like the combat that you see on screen in the Revenge of the Sith film, even though the game itself it looks like a game from 2005, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I picked it up and played it in 2017, played the whole thing through, and it's still a blast. And I feel like a lot of people really overlooked that game because back in those days, a movie tie-in game was generally going to be pretty bad. And it was just kind of, it was a known thing. Like, I think Iron Man came out in 2008, and Captain America, the first Avenger, came out like in 2009 or 10. Like those games had like movie tie-in games. Nobody's talking about those games, right? But not really. But the Revenge of the Sith game was a lot of fun, and I have a lot of fond memories of the one-on-one lightsaber duels, like with my little brother and stuff. I think that game was a blast.
It's actually, I think that's like one of the most inspired picks on here. It's I was really happy to see that. Like the production values on that game are ridiculous, and there's like, it came out before the film.
Yes. And
there was like clips from the film in it.
Yeah.
Like in like very small like a quarter of your TV screen boxes, but still. And I think like with that game, it kind of reminds me of the games that EA did for Lord of the Rings, for like Two Towers and Return of the King. Like those, like they were like just kind of like beat 'em up games, but they were like really good, and they looked really good, and they used a lot. They used like the Howard Shore music and high quality voice acting and stuff, and like I think Revenge of the Sith is like on that same level.
Yeah. If people don't know, it's worth pointing out that like James Arnold Taylor did the voice for the Obi-Wan in that game, and he does a really good job doing the sort of McGregor impression. And then I think Matt Lucas from like the Gendy Tartakovsky Clone Wars series, like the very cartoony Clone Wars series that's no longer canon, like he does the Hayden Anakin in that, and the voices are good. It has an alternate ending, which is fun, where Anakin basically like kills Obi-Wan on Mustafar, and then Sidious is like, congratulations, and then Anakin like impales the Emperor, and like, now the galaxy belongs to me, I think is the line that he has. And it's like a goofy little alternate ending where like I think they call the cutscene like The Revenge of the Sith or Revenge of the Sith or something. It's like this is like the ultimate if Anakin hadn't been burned. And it has like deleted scenes from the movie. Like there, if you look at the deleted scenes on like the Blu-ray for Revenge of the Sith, there's a lot of like unfinished footage from like sort of little Raiders of the Lost Ark gags that they tried to put into that opening Battle of Coruscant, but that section of the film is already like super long, so of course it makes sense that they cut a lot of that out. But yeah, there's a lot of cool bad guys to fight, a lot of like the goofy little Trade Federation droids and various things like that they threw in there. It's a fun time.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot better than the Phantom Menace tie-in game.
Yeah.
That came out on PlayStation and PC back in the day. And like, yeah, this game, I really wish it would be backwards compatible on Xbox One. I think that would be a great way for people to revisit it. And I think it would look really good in like 4K. I think there's a lot of visual detail in it that I think would hold up like pretty well. So hopefully we'll see that, because just about all the Xbox Star Wars games are backwards compatible now.
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. There was like a weird little networking glitch. So you're saying like if they brought Revenge of the Sith to backward compatible?
Yeah.
I
think that would be great.
Yeah, that's like my top two. Like, well, no, it's like top 3 backward compatible titles that I want are like Revenge of the Sith, Jedi Outcast, and then either Splinter Cell 1 or Splinter Cell Chaos Theory. Like, I'm hoping we get those 3 at some point. So Phil Spencer, I'm sure you're listening, Phil Spencer. Like, give us those 3 exactly.
He always listens. Here he's taking our advisement on Blinks the Time Sweeper.
Oh yeah.
To BC into advisement. Yeah. Anyways, okay. So then, Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
So you were there. You covered it for StarWars.com. Like, how are you feeling about this game right now? Do you think it's a game that has potential to end up on a top 10 Star Wars game list in 10, 15 years?
My gut feeling is that yes, like, had that game been out and I played it, the game that I'm expecting it to be, I think, it would have wound up on my top 10 list, hypothetically. Obviously, when you're making like a top 10 list, you have to take into account, that you're including various genres and that, you're honoring like the impact of things like TIE Fighter and the Star Wars arcade game from '83. But yeah, I mean, it looks like about what I expected it to be, which is not a bad thing because, I was very much picturing sort of a Force Unleashed meets God of War kind of thing, very like a very polished, authored action game experience with a very like cinematic bent to it,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people would be fine if it was like KOTOR 3 or whatever, but I kind of always expected that it was sort of a spiritual successor to the Force Unleashed. I think that's like a very marketable thing, right? Like a very pick up and play hack and slash Jedi action game. I'm a huge Respawn fan. From the moment Titanfall 1 came out, I was like, I don't know who Respawn are, but they're going to be getting a lot of my money every time they put out a game because Titanfall 1 was incredible. It sort of came out of nowhere for me, and I just totally fell in love with it. Titanfall 2 is like even 10 times better. Like I just like the campaign in Titanfall 2 was incredible. Like
that shows Respawn's like single player chops right there.
Yeah, and it is like a different team in some respects, different game director and things like that. But yeah, the caliber of people that Respawn has, and the obviously, Titanfall 2 when that came out, it was sort of overlooked because of Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty Infinite Warfare coming out like in the same like
it was like sandwiched between those two.
Yeah, in the span of like 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, it was so stupid. It was so dumb. And like everybody that I was like friends with, at the time or playing Xbox games with, they were all like, "Oh, I'm getting Battlefield. Oh, I'm getting Call of Duty." And I'm just like, "You're all idiots." Like I'll be over here in my Titanfall 2 corner. Like how dare you? And then and that was just kind of the prevailing thing that happened. The sales seemed to have really been hurt because there was not a lot of people playing it in the grand scheme of things at the time when it came out. But the campaign is one of the best games of the last 10 years, easily. Just incredible level design, incredible character work with like the robot and what's the name? Jack, I think.
Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love that game, and it was so polished and optimized and just gorgeous to look at. You know, a lot of games come out nowadays, and it's like, okay, you can tell that you had to throw this together in a hurry because crunch and because, you know, Western capitalism. Like, we got to get that game out the door every year, and regardless of how crappy it looks. And no, Titanfall 2 was not that at all. It was basically a masterpiece.
Just so fun to play too.
Yes.
Like the gunplay, the traversal, like the wall running and all of that, and then like the way it like the gameplay switches when you're in the Titan. Like it was just there was so much variety. Like I think I played through that game in 1, maybe 2 sittings. Like it just kept my interest. Like I just played through it in a weekend, and like,
And I did do the interview with Doug Riley at Lucasfilm and Vince Zampella from Respawn, and I did really try to get them to spill details about mechanics and systems and things like that by bringing up things about, you know, Titanfall 2 and how is this going to be different. And of course they were very tight-lipped, but I think like a picture still begins to form about what it'll be, you know, like they you know, it does sound like there's still an emphasis on like agility, you know, speed. So I don't expect like wall running like Titanfall, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like player movement is a big thing for Fallen Order, which with Respawn, that's not even remotely surprising. Like that's kind of what they do well, is, you know, that traversal and stuff. So you know, Apex, they took wall running out, they took Titans out, but it still is a game that just feels incredible to like run around in and slide and stuff. So,
there was a bit of wall running in that trailer, though, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I think there is in the So it's it would be
and like some ledge grabbing and that sort of thing.
It's been a while since I've seen that particular trailer. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. There was wall running in the trailers, so I think it could get very crazy. I don't think that they'll go full like Force Unleashed, like pulling Star Destroyers out of the sky, because he is a Padawan, basically. But yeah, I think it's gonna be Revenge of the Sith level, like Anakin powers, you know, where you can jump really far and really high, and you know. I'm guessing that when you swing your lightsaber, you can swing it really fast and things like that. So yeah, I'm super excited to get my hands on it. The villain is from like Charles Soule's amazing Darth Vader run, the Second Sister, and those Purge troopers. Like I'm loving all that stuff, like all the kind of connective tissue with the Inquisitors, and I don't know. I half expect like the game to sort of end up on Mustafar, and maybe you kill like one villain, and then like Darth Vader comes and like, you know, kills you from behind, and then it's like roll credits. But we'll see. I don't know. I'm trying to picture how, like, if this is going to be like a trilogy kind of thing, or if I don't know. It could be interesting. Like, I don't want the character to die, but I also feel like it needs to be like a contained story in some ways, unless they're already like, oh, we're definitely making 3 games, which, I mean, we'll see.
I mean, it was kind of like in Rebels when, you know, you have a character like Kanan. You're like, well, he's obviously not in A New Hope, and there's obviously no more Jedi by that time. So, you know, it's kind of a foregone conclusion.
Well, he's like a young guy, and it's like Order 66 just happened, so it's like, you know, we could get some games out of it if they wanted it to be a trilogy, and have it just sort of be, you know, the whole thing take place in like the span of 2 or 3 years after Return of the Jedi or something, or Revenge of the Sith, I mean. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited to see what they do with like the story stuff, and it looks like going to be a lot of original material, original planets, all new characters basically for the most part, which I think is what makes for a memorable Star Wars game, right? Like Bastila Shan and Kyle Katarn and things like that. I mean, those are the characters that people love and remember. They're not like, oh man, like I loved that part where I was, saw Han Solo in that one video game, whatever. I don't know. That stuff just, it's not like those characters are old news or anything, but it's like you've played the game where you fight Boba Fett, you've played the game where you fight Vader or play as Vader, like, give us new stuff, and people will embrace that, I think, more than just kind of the familiar.
Yeah, like the Hoth battle for the 10th time.
Yeah. Exactly.
Even though I love Hoth battles, but
right.
Yeah, I think this time period is one of my favorites in Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
Because you have stuff like that Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith comic from Charles Soule, which, like you said, was fantastic. Rogue One, like any of this, like pre A New Hope, post Revenge of the Sith, like, and I think like it really, like, it's been explored to a degree, but it's so fascinating, like the true rise of the Empire, and then like, and then on the other side, the rise of the rebellion. And I think like it's a really fun, like, time period sandbox to play in. So, it would be cool if they kind of planned this to be like an arc, a trilogy. But at the same time, EA only has a few years left of that Star Wars license. So
true.
I don't know.
Yeah, unless they try to renew it to be exclusive again. But yeah, I don't know. That's a big question mark, I guess, in my head. But like whether they would or should or whatnot. But yeah, it's like, I think that like Solo and Rebels are two of my favorite things to come from the Disney era of Star Wars. I think Last Jedi being like my favorite, but Solo and Rebels are fantastic, and it's like those both take place between 3 and 4. They coexist nicely, and they feel extremely different. They're concerned with very different parts of the sort of universe and things, and yet they both have Darth Maul in them, and so it's like, yeah, we can get very different like tones and sort of like stuff made for different audiences that kind of take place in roughly the same time period, and use the sort of the vastness of the galaxy to our advantage, and hopefully that it looks like Fallen Order is definitely going to have its own distinctive look and feel and identity. A lot of people are kind of upset that they cast like a white dude as the protagonist, because it's like, well, Iden Versio is this amazing like woman of color, and so she felt like a very like bold choice, and people really love her, and she's like, the best thing to come out of Battlefront 2. So some people are like, well, Cameron Monaghan is sort of like a regression in terms of like diverse casting, and yeah, I see that. I do get that. And it sucks for people who like look at the trailer and like that's the kind of the thing that they, in their gut, they kind of walk away with. I think it's perfectly valid, and so that kind of sucks. But I'm a big old school Mad TV fan. I used to watch that like every day, and so to see Deborah Wilson in Star Wars, I was like, holy shit, are you kidding me? That's who that is. She used to do like just these incredible characters on Mad TV, and yeah. So I mean, and Monaghan is, my wife is a big fan of Shameless, and from the episodes that I've seen, he's my favorite part of that show. His character Ian, who's like, he's like a gay paramedic, and he's like very smart. He's like one of the more like resourceful characters in a show that is like all about, smart, resourceful characters kind of being con men. I think that, he struggles with like mental illness in that show. I think he's sort of like a bipolar gay paramedic or something. And it's like, if we could get those kinds of interesting character experiences into his Star Wars character, then people wouldn't be so upset that it's a white dude. Is Fallen Order going to be about a gay mentally ill Jedi? I don't think so. I doubt it. You know what I mean? Because it's like, how much of that stuff can you really get into like an action game about, lightsabers and pew pew? So, I mean, I do get people being upset by the casting. But I also think that Deborah Wilson is going to be fucking incredible as like his mentor figure. So hopefully that's the case. We'll see. But yeah, that's something that people who make games have to be mindful of now. It's easy to, see Spider-Man's success and be like, oh, well, it's like a white male straight Spider-Man. I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah, I think it is kind of a disappointment, like, with the way that Star Wars and Lucasfilm are kind of pushing into like more diverse casting across the board, and which is bringing in like whole new groups of fans with like incredible perspectives, and who are creating their own like incredible content in the form of like podcasts or anything else. Like, I think like the Star Wars fandom benefits from diversity, but they nailed it with Iden Versio in Battlefront 2. And then this, I guess we just need to see how it plays out. I will say, like, Cam has a great face for, like, the mocap side for, like, a Padawan.
Yeah.
Like, he has a great Padawan face.
Yeah.
Like, I'm even to the point where, like, I'm like, why aren't we getting more alien protagonists in Star Wars?
Yeah.
Like, I would love to see more of that, like some of the other like non-human species.
Yeah.
In it, but I think like that's what they went with. That's their vision. Cool. We'll see. We'll see how he ends up as a character.
Yeah. It's tricky, right? Because they've done basically the Battlefront games, and they've done a bunch of mobile games, and then now we've got Fallen Order, and it's like that's kind of what we have right now. And so, I think if we had like more volume of games, again, you mentioned the EA license exclusivity and stuff, and so I mean that's kind of that's like a symptom of that. Is like if it wasn't exclusive, then maybe we'd have a dozen Star Wars games, and we'd have one where you could play as a Rhodian protagonist, and one where you're a more where you're a woman, and or ones where you can pick what your protagonist looks like and things. And I don't know, it's just like when you do like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, it's like, okay, so you can pick, like a lot of people would prefer that. I think I would prefer that, but it does add like, it doubles a lot of the production costs like instantaneously.
Yeah.
So it makes it this like huge undertaking. So I think in an ideal world, maybe you have an RPG where, okay, you can create your character like Skyrim style, choose your species, your sex, everything, and with something like Fallen Order, I expected it to be very much like an authored experience where it's like, okay, this is who the character is, this is their species, skin color, gender, hair color, all that stuff. I knew that was going to happen with this game, just because of the kind of game that it sort of promised to be. Like, and so I do get people's disappointment, but hopefully, like, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we're going to have just more games, and so that won't be as much of an issue. But
yeah, we'll and hopefully with like upcoming technology, a new console generation, we can kind of get back to the promise of, that I think like Mass Effect set for me, like personally, like with that series, like the fact that I could choose like my gender and like all these like facial features, and then I could make all these choices and they would like affect across 3 games. Like, after playing, the Mass Effect trilogy, I was like, oh yeah, this is where video games are going. And like, no one's been crazy enough to like attempt that again.
Yeah, it's like you have Mass Effect Andromeda doing that stuff, and you have like the Bethesda games trying to do it, and various things, but it's like you can't have the really, really like high quality performance capture stuff and like character creation. So like even like in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I think strikes a good balance, like you do have like a male and a female character. And maybe I'm not the authority on this stuff, so I mean, anyone listening and is like, you sound like a dumbass, this is purely my observation, but it's like they're, from a technical standpoint, you're making compromises no matter what you're doing in a video game. So with like Fallen Order, you get like you saw in Battlefront 2 with Aiden, like that's part of why Aiden is so great, is that's Janina Javankar, that's her performance, that's Janina is Aiden, and that's what you see is what you get, and that's awesome. And so but then when you do something like Mass Effect Andromeda, you're stripping away the performance capture value, right? You're stripping away like the kind of realism, and it's like it's the big question of like, what do you value as a player? And again, if we've got 3 big blockbuster EA games in the last X number of years, Battlefront 2, and Fallen Order, it's like it's slim pickings in some ways, but I think that when we get that like sort of dream Star Wars game where it's like an RPG with character creation, it's not going to look as good as Fallen Order. It's not going to look as good as Battlefront 2's campaign, but people will be able to then have a character that hopefully represents who they are. And, if you want like a black character with like dreadlocks, or, your particular hair type, or, I'd love to have a dude who's fat, right? Or whatever, a dude who's bigger, and, things like that. And it's just, I think we're going to get those things, but, people look at Fallen Order and they're like, oh, we get the really good looking white skinny straight guy potentially, or whatever. I mean, I don't know that he's straight. I'm just kind of I don't think that Star Wars is always gonna be like, oh, this guy is, like that, like he may be completely aromantic in the context of the game or whatever. So but when you kind of like leave it open to interpretation, you sort of just assume that it's the default, because that's just the way media is, right? So I don't know. But that's me talking about things that I'm not really like an authority on, and I acknowledge that. I usually kind of like listen to people who are smarter than me when it comes to how games can be better about representation, and hopefully Fallen Order surprises people in that regard with like Deborah Wilson's character and other characters like the second sister. I know that I'm really excited to see a female character with a red lightsaber in her hand, and I know that a lot of female fans are going to see second sister in action and be like, oh, it's like it's a badass woman, with a lightsaber, getting to just be a villain. And things like that are exciting. So I mean, and we have no idea who's playing her, so that could be a fun little reveal at some point. Who's that character under the mask? Who's playing them? Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't even really thought of like the storytelling potential here, but like outside of like the era. But yeah, there are like quite a few mysteries here, and that's That's pretty cool.
Yeah, who is Cal Kestis's master? Whose lightsaber is that? Basically, they hinted that potentially the lightsaber that you use in the game is actually not yours, but maybe your fallen master's. And it looks to me, my sort of, halfway informed opinion is that it was maybe a double-bladed lightsaber that got chopped in half because it's like sort of sparking, It's very damaged looking on the bottom. So I think that it was maybe a double-bladed lightsaber that was cut in half. So then it raises the question of, well, what Jedi has a double-bladed lightsaber? What's their story? Things like that. So yeah, they definitely showed us a glimpse of the world and the characters in this trailer. Like, they definitely did not give us the whole picture yet.
Yeah, it was kind of like a tone piece. Like, you kind of get like the conflict, like the external and internal conflict for Cal. I really like the scene where, he's like his friend is like falling off the ship that they're working on, into like a Sarlacc pit. It looks like, for some reason, and he has to like make the choice. Does he, use his force powers and reveal himself here, or does he just like let his friend die to like keep his cover?
Yeah, right. Like Superman and Man of Steel. Like, oh, do I let my Jonathan
Kevin
Kent?
Costner.
Yes, that's so sad.
Oh no,
oh, so sad.
Oh no, yeah. No, that's great stuff, and like, again, like, this isn't an RPG, so I'm not expecting like a ton of like, player agency when it comes to like making big choices and stuff, but
yeah,
I mean, that would be really exciting if, it was kind of dynamic and like, you could reveal yourself at different points in the game, and that would like, affect what happens and like the difficulty and stuff. But I'm kind of assuming, being that it's an action game, like, you're probably like, everyone's gonna, by the start of the game, like, everyone's gonna know that you're a Jedi, and people are going to be on the hunt for you.
Yeah.
Otherwise it would just be like you going to work and stuff.
By the time this podcast gets up, my article may be published anyway, but like, if not, like, please click on my article anyway. But I did actually get them to, I did ask them about, is there a stealth mechanic? Like, are you in hiding? Things like that. And it does sound like, yeah, you're like during the gameplay, when you're actually in the game world, yeah, people are going to know you're a Jedi. Like, you're not going to be like hiding and sneaking around. Like, it's very much about, just cutting through everything in sight with your lightsaber. So it'll be interesting to see how they strike that balance with like story. So it's a case of where like video game marketing is just sort of notoriously bad at like communicating what the game actually is. Like, this happened with Halo 5 as well, where like, we thought it was going to be like Master Chief versus Spartan Locke, and it wasn't that game at all, and that didn't bother me. I still love that game, but there is like a very, vocal, maybe even majority, who are like, what the hell, man? Like, I thought this was going to be Locke versus Chief, and it's there's really only like one mission in the game that is like that, and yeah, and then there's like a lot of big reveals, of course, where then it goes off in a different direction. But yeah, video game marketing is very bad at like communicating what the experience of actually playing the game is, until they show gameplay. But of course, to show gameplay, you have to have a pretty finished, polished product, and like Western video game developers are just not very good at doing that until like a month before the game comes out, so or less. So
yeah, and I mean, like, it's very rare when developers hit that like perfect balance of like, we're revealing this, here's some gameplay that also tells a story. And like, I feel like the most recent God of War game, like, that reveal to me was like the perfect video game reveal, because I'm like, oh, I get what this is. I know what kind of game it is, and I also like get like the story side of it too, and that's it does not happen often.
Gotcha. I actually haven't played God of War yet, but I have sort of like a feeling about what the reveal is, because being on Twitter all the time, like, you can't help but like,
Yeah.
you know, Game of Thrones will get spoiled for you like the day that the new episode's out, you know, so you just have to like
Oh, yeah.
not be on Twitter basically. And so I feel like I know what the twist in God of War is, but I haven't played it yet. I was busy playing Spider-Man still, I think, when that one came out or something. I don't know. But I play a lot of Xbox, and then PS4 is kind of like what I fire up when I just want to play a like a PlayStation exclusive game. So I'll definitely get God of War soon. I just haven't yet. But yeah, I think Fallen Order is going to probably take some cues from how that game worked, you know.
Yeah. I mean, when do you think, and maybe you know, because maybe you asked about this at the interview, when are we going to actually see some gameplay of Fallen Order?
Sounds like E3. They said come to E3. So,
okay.
yeah. So I think E3 is the answer to that. But I mean, how much? I mean, who knows? But it sounds like they are going to have a gameplay trailer to show off at EA Play in the days leading up to E3. So very much looking forward to that. And like, geez, let's be real. That's like right around the corner somehow. Like we're almost to May now, and then E3 starts like the beginning of June or something. So usually anyway. I could be wrong, but I think it's like right around the corner.
And I think I remember hearing a couple months ago that EA was not going to do like a proper press conference, but they were still going to have a presence, but it was going to be mostly in the form of like playable demo stations.
Oh, yeah, you're right. They aren't doing like EA Play this year, are they? I don't think. Yeah, I think you're right about that. That they're just gonna maybe like during the Xbox, like Xbox always has like a kick-ass press conference. They may show Fallen Order's gameplay trailer like during the Xbox presentation. That would actually make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I could totally see that, and then like journalists and I guess fans too will be getting like hands-on during like that week.
Yeah, there may be like a little mission demo or something to actually play. I'm not sure. I assume that at least press will probably get to feel what the gameplay feels like, but I don't know. I don't know details on any of that stuff. I just know that for sure they're gonna be at E3 showing off Fallen Order. I do know that much.
Did they didn't give a date for a release date?
Yeah.
They did?
I believe it's November 15th is what they said.
Wait, so 3 days after The Mandalorian?
Yeah, like
premieres?
Right. Here, let me pull up my article. So they did give a date. I just have to find it. Yeah, I believe it was the 15th or the 16th of November. So yeah, it's like right after Mandalorian. It's like sandwiched between Mandalorian and Episode 9.
Episode 9.
Yeah, it's like a crazy like 3-week period or something. It's insane, but
man, I'm not gonna make it to Christmas at this rate.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, I'm like not finding my own article for some reason, but yeah, it was November 16th or 15th, one of those two. So, yeah, pretty wild that I kind of expected it to come out in October. Yeah, 15th. Yeah, it's November 15th for the PC, PS4 and Xbox. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's going to be a busy month and a half for Star Wars fans.
Yeah. At least Mandalorian, they're not like dumping the whole season of The Mandalorian at once. Yes. They're just doing it like Game of Thrones style. So,
yes, that's much better for me personally because I can't really ever sit down and watch 15 hours of TV in one sitting.
It's very hard.
It takes me a while.
Yeah,
and so. Yeah, it sucks like being present on Twitter and stuff, and when that stuff's happening, you're like, I've only watched 3 episodes, and you're talking about episode 8.
Yeah.
But okay, well, yeah, I guess that kind of wraps up everything we know about Fallen Order, and looking forward to your piece going up on Polygon.
StarWars.com for the interview with Zampella and Doug Riley from Lucasfilm. Yeah, that's going to be a StarWars.com thing.
Okay, great. So, yeah, be looking out for that sometime next week. And anything else you want to plug as we wrap up here?
I don't think so. I can't really think of anything right now. Like I just had like the Variety piece come out. I had all that Celebration coverage and the book come
Yeah.
out and the Morrowind oral history. So so I'm kind of at a point where I'm back to like a little bit more survival mode where I can just kind of write some articles, and just kind of breathe a little bit again after the
Mm-hmm.
book and the oral history that was like almost as long as the book and all that stuff and celebrations. So yeah, I'm kind of at the point where I need to think about what the next like big thing is going to be, and I've got some really cool ideas, of course, but not really like in a state where I can like talk about them. But I've got some cool stuff coming up at StarWars.com, of course, but maybe like too early to actually talk about specifics. So we'll see. But yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Nice.
There's always like exciting stuff that I'm working on, but it's always a question of when it's gonna go live and things. So hopefully, I'll get to write a second book at some point. But
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
far as right now, there's a few different directions that could go, and so kind of a wait and see thing. But fingers crossed for
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, like the easy answer is KOTOR 2, which I think there is a fascinating story there, but I don't know if people really want to talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that KOTOR 2 is somebody else's book, I think that
Yeah.
KOTOR 1 was very much my game that, meant the world to me at a particular point in time.
Mm,
And I don't think KOTOR 2 is that for me. As much as I
yeah.
love it, I think that, it does a lot of things better than KOTOR 1. I think the dialogue and the characters are phenomenal. But I just
Hmm.
don't think that I want to write a book just about KOTOR 2. If I read a book and it has KOTOR 2 stuff in it, I think it would be a book where, um, you know, maybe like sort of a guide to like the history of Star Wars games or something like that. That's kind of sort
Hmm.
of one of the dream projects kicking around in my head. But I've already said too much. But it's
Ooh.
like who knows like what's even remotely possible. But yeah, that would be a fun thing to do. It would be to sort of take a really big picture look. Take the KOTOR thing and kind of okay, what's that look like when we try to squeeze in like all those big games into one book and make it work. But um, yeah, and then I have other related book ideas that have nothing to do with that whatsoever. So we'll see. We'll see what I can get away with, right?
Nice, nice. And yeah, I mean, I do feel like the history and development of Star Wars games is kind of like an underserved area in like Star Wars publishing because I mean, obviously there are countless books about the making of the movies, but like there's books celebrating the posters, books celebrating the Topps trading
Yeah.
cards. But like we've never really had that like all-encompassing book about the games.
Yeah, there's the one LucasArts coffee table book by Rob Smith, he's like the PR head at like Treyarch now, the makes Black
Mm.
Ops, and so he did a book that was sort of like the history of LucasArts as a company, and it took a very certain kind of angle. It's a very visual book. Um,
Mm.
I think that you could do something similar to that, and have it focus on less on games that were canceled and like what could have been type stuff, and more on like, okay, this is a game that actually did come out, and have more sort of oral history stuff incorporated, and less of like,
Mhm.
here's a bunch of concept art, and sort of celebrate the games that actually did make it to release and things. So I don't know. I'm excited by possibilities, but yeah, nothing concrete really, of course.
Cool, cool. Well, I hope just as a fan and consumer that that book gets made.
Thanks. We'll see.
So, All right. Well, thank you again for joining me here. It's been great to, chat about all this stuff with you. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, the easy thing is Twitter, Alex J. Kane, Kane, and and I'm usually at StarWars.com and Polygon writing about games and stuff and Space Wizards. So
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, thanks a ton again for joining us, and hope to have you back again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Sounds good.